tundra swan, they may have up to 20% of their weight as feathers. Okay. Primary functions are insulation for temperature control. How many of you own a down vest or a down jacket, down sleeping bag, down blanket, down anything? Okay. That is really warm. You pay extra money for that because it's really warm. How many of you have seen a bird, like a regular dove or a robin, that you look out and it's kind of cold outside, and you look, that dove's twice as big as he normally looks. They're just all puffed up. They've got those feathers all pushed out, trapping air on the inside, which keeps them warm. Insulation for flight, okay, essential for flight. Color and communication for camouflage. The females normally are more of a drab color. They have to sit on the eggs and brood the chicks and all that. So they got to be camouflaged. The male has to be very colorful because he's got to attract the female. That role reverses in some instances. One particular one is a Fowler rope. And a Fowler rope is a sandpiper. They breed up on the northern slopes up in Alaska and northern Canada. Well, she is the colorful one, and he's the drab one. She lays the egg, says, here, you sit on this, and I'll be right back. Wink, wink, and off she goes. He's stuck raising the kids. Secondary function is for swimming, sound production. There is a snipe. Okay, I know fallacy or fantasy has said that a snipe is not a real animal or a real critter. Yes, it's another sandpiper, and it communicates through its mating ritual with its feathers. It flies way up high in the air, and it does a lot of looping around, and the sound of the feathers, he can create a sound that you can hear probably half a mile away, and you know he's doing it. So you rush over to watch this display that he's doing. It's really kind of fascinating. And on hearing, think of an owl's face. Look over here at this owl right here. Get a chance to notice his face. The feathers kind of form a disc, a round disc, and that funnels the sound towards its ears. Well, there's also little hawks that do that too, some harrier hawks. And the little ones you see flying low over the hills, over the fields, and what they're doing is listening for small birds, or listening for mice or rats or something like that, and then they'll go down and hear it. So they have that same facial disc that they use to funnel the sounds. And owls, one quick story on a great gray owl. That's our largest owl that we have here in North America. Very rarely do they come south of the northern part of the United States. They're normally up in the boreal forest, the tundra. They have an ability to hear really, really well. They can hear a vole or a lemming up to 3 feet under the snow. And what they're not hearing, I mean, they do hear the movement of this vole underneath there going through his little tunnels under the snow. But what they're really focusing on is the heartbeat of that animal. And he's going to focus on that heartbeat and go in and get it. I'm on the stove here. Did I? Where's my tech guy? I can do it. Arrows.
Here. 1 second.
If you guys come up with any questions while I'm talking, shout them out. This is something I said, smart question, and that's to cover it at that time.
I did see, what I think was an upland sandpiper.
Upland sandpipers are really cool. They have a really good sound that they make when they're in flight.
Oh, I didn't see that.
Uplands are coming, so watch for them. You'll see them coming in.
Oh, that's funny.
It's a sandpiper that it's got a huge body, a little tiny head.
Yeah, and the long legs. Yeah.
Okay, so let's try this. Know where you were? Okay. Check your thing. It may work now. Wrong one, right? Try it. Okay, something happened whenever this popped up. She can't. It's
Your assistant.
yeah, probably. So, let's try that. See if
There are three basic types of feathers. The contour feathers, that's going to be the flight feathers, the tail feathers, that makes the contour of the bird, okay? The down feathers, those are the ones that you have for insulation, the little fuzzy feathers you sometimes find in your swimming pool or in your bushes or stuff they lose. And then the phyllo-plume feathers, those are the ones for, particularly for flycatchers, like a scissor tail or something like that. They've got little tiny feathers right beside the base of their bill. That they can, when they're flying around trying to catch an insect, that feather will feel it. It's like feelers on a cat or a dog. You know, they can feel things, and it's like a feeler for them. And then they snap that bill closed and grab that insect. And feathers consist of a shaft and then the webbing. Almost every field guide that you find for birds has a drawing in the front that kind of shows the parts of things, okay? It's always there, and for plants as well, I've understood. Don't want to mess this up. Anyway, you see the little barbs there, the little hooks, they're on all the feathers, and they kind of act like a zipper to keep the feather in its shape. And that's when you see birds preening all the time, trying to just keep their feathers in line where they're supposed to be. And this is one of the drawings in the front of a book. It shows you all the structure of the feathers on the wing, okay? Feathers are not just put on a bird willy-nilly. There's a certain order that they have to be. You got the basic flight feathers here back to like the P5 and the S2. Those are your flight feathers. The ones up front, those are called coverts. They're on top of those feathers, top of the flight feathers to protect them, particularly in a strong wind. You got a peregrine falcon that's in a stoop at over 240 miles an hour. That wind is pretty strong on the feather, okay? And so you need some protection, and that's what that's for. And this is a picture of various birds doing their preening. Sometimes they'll do this for hours. They go through every single feather on their body except their head. They can't reach that for some strange reason. I don't know why. Okay, now we'll talk about their skeleton. They're light. Their bones are actually hollow. They don't have the marrow in them that we do. They're a lot lighter. They have long necks. Their bones are fused. It makes them stronger. Their ribs are protected. They have a modified sternum. It kind of forms a keel. If you've ever butchered a chicken or a turkey for dinner, you know that you've seen that keel where it kind of separates the two sides of the breast. That is. And they're lightweight. The beak of a bird. When I was in Ecuador, I held the beak of a deceased toucan. And you think that thing weighs a little bit. It's like styrofoam when you pick it up. There's nothing to it. But yet they can really clamp down on a nut, crack it. And this is kind of a picture of what the bones look like on there. You get the human, and then the eagle is same size bone, but it's hollow. It's very light. Even a large eagle like the bald eagle or the golden eagle, at most he might weigh 12 or 14 pounds. Not very much at all, because he's got to be able to lift off. And then there's various different types of beaks. For instance, on this cardinal, and by the way, this is a young cardinal, a young male cardinal. His beak is a conical shape. And that conical shape is kind of robust for cracking seeds. He's got to crack that seed open where he cracks the shell so he can get to the seed. So it's a really strong beak. This is like a chisel. The woodpecker's beak is really something special because at most, this is our largest woodpecker. It's called a pileated woodpecker. At most, his bill is going to be 1 or maybe 1.5 inches long. Now, he's hearing a grub inside this tree that he wants to get. That grub is 3, maybe 4 inches in. How's he going to get it out of that little tunnel with just 1.5 inches beak? He's got a tongue that's 4 or 5 times longer than his bill, and it's hooked on the end like a harpoon. He shoots that out, harpoons that grub, and pulls it back. Now, where's all that tongue go? He's got a cavity in his skull that goes up in his skull like that around. It's amazing. Now, some woodpeckers, like the flickers, their tongue is actually sticky because they feed on the ground a lot and they eat ants. So they'll shoot that sticky tongue out and grab a whole mouthful of ants. So they get in a fire ant bed and like, what the heck is this, you know?
Bad life choice.
And then you got the beaks that flycatchers use for catching insects. And again, that would have the little phyllo plume feathers there at the edge of the base of the bill, but they'll fly out and grab a bug, and 9 times out of 10, will return to that same stick. So if you've got him in your binocular or your camera and you're trying to photograph him and he flies off, stay on the stick. Don't try to follow the bird. Stay on that stick because he's probably going to come right back to it. And when he does, you got him right there. Most flycatchers return to that. They don't, not always, but they mostly do. Pelicans, we got 2 pelicans in North America. Both of them have the pouch. This is the brown pelican. We also have the American white pelican. And they both feed differently. The brown pelican will hover up over them. See, if you've been to the coast, you've seen them hover up over the water and then dive in to get a fish, right? They tuck those wings back and take a head dive in. The white pelican, and I've got a video I took out here at the Nature Center over in the marsh area, probably 30 of the white pelicans. They tip upside down like a mallard duck does, you know, and eat aquatic plants and stuff. Well, there was like 30 of them all together in a really tight group. And you could have put a Michael Jackson song to this thing. They tip up in unison, feed, and then tip back down. Move a little bit, tip up, and fall back down. It's just like up, down, and literally you could have put music to it. Didn't. Wrens here in our houses and around our homes and stuff. You got 2 wrens probably. You got a Buick's wren and a Carolina wren. This is a Buick's wren, and they both have a little white eye stripe. And then they got that long pointy beak. And what that does, it gets little ants and bugs and spiders and stuff out of nooks and crannies, little crevices. And they're very loud. Usually in your backyard, this is one of the loudest birds other than like a blue jay. Mallard ducks have a beak that's kind of flattened out as for pulling up aquatic plants and stuff. Northern shovelers. Notice how big that bill is, and it's also kind of shaped like a shovel or a spatula. What he does, he'll just stick his head down, but he's feeding on aquatic insects, aquatic plants and stuff, nutrients that are at the surface or very close to the surface. And sometimes you'll see a whole group of these guys together kind of going in a circle, and they don't allow other ducks to come into their circle. You won't ever see a mallard in with a group of northern shovelers. Maybe on the outside, but he's not a member. But they all get in there and they move around like that. The hummingbird, they get the nectar out of the plants, and so they're pretty plant specific, or there's only certain ones they can go to because they don't have enough to fill. I did photograph a saber-winged hummingbird in Ecuador. His bill was about twice as long as his entire body. He was going after some devil's trumpets, which is a type of datura, has a long, long, big down hanging, it's like a bell, like a red bell. He's the only one that could actually feed on the nectar out of that without going through the side of it. And this is a bird we get on our Texas coast called roseate spoonbill. And if you look at the bill on that, it's kind of like a flat shovel. And two, he goes along the top of the surface and strains nutrients off of the surface too. The face that only a mother could love. And he gets that pinkish wash from the little crustaceans and stuff that he eats, like the shrimp and stuff like that. And great blue heron, kind of like a dagger. And these guys, man, I've seen them stab fish, come up with fish. I got a video, I took one, fish was this big. And he fought it for like 20 minutes because they got to get it head first to swallow it. They swallow it whole. And he flipped it around this way, flipped it around that way. And finally he got it head first. And you can see it trying to get out of his throat. And you can see his whole throat moving around. And he got it down. And I don't know how he flew after that. And I've seen these guys eat turtles, swallow them whole. About that, they can swallow one down to about that big. And snakes, that I've seen them get snakes, and they have to kill the snake. And so they slap it on the ground, slap it this way, slap it that way. It'll wrap around his bill and all this kind of stuff. And they fight. That's usually their toughest fight, but they get that snake down too. And this is a phalarope. This is the one I told you about. This is the female because she's more colorful than the male. Okay. And what she does, she's got a little pointy bill for picking up nutrients off of the surface. And the way she gets those nutrients to come to the surface, she spins around in little tight circles real fast. And that creates an eddy, which brings nutrients up from the bottom of the pond to the surface. And I've seen as many as 200 or 300 of these on a pond, and they're all spinning. And every time I keep telling myself, Charlie, check to see if they're all going the same way. And I never do. It's like when I went to Ecuador, I'm on the below the equator. Does the toilet go this way or does it go that way? I forgot to look. Does my compass point north or did it point south? I didn't forget to look. This is a long-bill curlew. And that bill is between 7.5, maybe 8 inches long. And you may see long-bill curlew feeding right beside a least sandpiper or a godwit or something like that. The length of their bill tells what kind of insect or what kind of nutrient they're looking for. He can go way deep down into the sand and get a totally different species than that little least sandpiper right by that only has a bill about this long. He can go down about 1/2 an inch. This guy can go 7, 8, 9 inches and get a bigger worm or whatever's down there. So they don't care who else is around them. This is an osprey. And raptors, hawks, eagles, kites, those kind of guys, they've got that hook bill for tearing meat. And 98% of his diet is fish, but he will eat carrion or rabbit if he catches through there. If you see an osprey flying with a fish, you'll know immediately it's an osprey and not an eagle, or they both have kind of a whitish head and a black body, simply by the way he's carrying the fish. An eagle carries the fish like this. He grips it sideways and just carrying along like I would if I'm picking up a barbell. Osprey carries it aerodynamically the direction he's going. Yeah. And his feet, the bottom of his foot is kind of, well, it's almost barbed where he can grab a hold of slippery fish. They can grab eels and come out with them. The circulatory system. This is when I stole from you, Michael, I think. I don't know much about circulatory system other than we had a 4-chamber heart, blood goes out, goes to the wings and all that kind of stuff. And then comes back in to be cleaned and used again. So basically I'm not a doctor. They do have large hearts for their size. They pump more blood faster because they need it. They also have to maintain a body temperature of about 102 degrees in most cases. They have a heightened blood flow to their legs and their head. Heart rate increases as size decreases. Hummingbird has the largest heart for any bird for its size. His heartbeat can beat up to 1,300 beats per minute. That's really, really fast. I don't even know how you can detect it. It just sounds more like a hum. That's why they call hummingbird. Hummingbirds are fascinating. We'll get to these guys. And then on their lungs, they've got air sacs inside. And they fill those air sacs up. And then as they exhale, those air sacs empty into the lungs. So they're pretty much breathing in and out all the time in flat. When you're flying, 60, 70 miles an hour, the wind's coming at you, you got to be able to breathe up there. So they can do that. Some birds have more air sacs than others do. One bird, a grebe, has air sacs that he uses. It's a little water bird, and you'll see them on the water. Sometimes they don't have to go under like this to go underwater. They can just sink straight down. They regulate the air in those air sacs, and they can go straight down. Or they can come up with just their head above, look around, and then go right straight back down. Kind of like a submarine. They're very good. As far as the reproductive system, you can read that for yourself. Japanese quail is testing swell from 8 to 3,000 milligrams in a few days or weeks. And females have one ovary. All birds lay eggs. If they had to carry this egg internally, it'd be hard for them to get around to food and all that kind of stuff. So they lay the egg and the chick grows inside that egg. Most chicks are altricial, meaning they're born naked with no feathers, their eyes sealed, and they depend 100% on parents to come and feed them and give them nutrients. That's the ones you normally see in the little nest that you get. There are a lot of birds that are born precocial. As soon as that egg opens up, they're out and running. Chicken. And these are usually birds that nest on the ground. Chickens, think of a chicken. Chick's born, he's got that fuzzy little feather and his eyes are open, he's running around. Killdeer and some of the other sandpipers, as soon as they come out of the egg, they're hitting it. They're going after bugs. And their timing, particularly the sandpipers that nest up along the tundra, their timing, when they hatch out of their deals, it's the same time all the mosquitoes hatch up there. And so, cheeseburger time, they go after those right immediately. And parents can either watch them or not, because they don't have to teach the bird how to feed. He's already ready to go. Oh, you saw my one and only bird porn. The egg on the right, notice how pointed that is. A lot of birds, particularly seabirds, like the murres and alcids and auks and stuff, they lay their eggs and stuff on ledges. Penguins, for instance, lay their eggs on ledges, rock ledges. They don't build a nest per se. And so to keep those eggs from rolling off of the new ledge is shaped like that. It'll roll in a circle instead of going off the ledge. Now, they do have a problem with gulls coming in and stealing them. Another problem. And that's the only, make it as you will. These are least terns, by the way, and they're a threatened species. They're our smallest tern species. So learn the parts of a bird. Again, in every field guide you find, and I particularly like Sibley's guide or National Geographic, there's Peterson's, there's tons of field guides. In fact, this one right here is the one I used a lot. And here's the drawings right in here, and they come in the front of the books. All of them have those. Even the books I have for Europe and Costa Rica, places like that, have drawings of birds that you might find that shows what the parts are. And they become important to you when you're talking to somebody who says, well, look, you're looking for the mallard stripe on this guy, or you're looking for the super laurel, or the lord, check the lords on this bird. It should be yellow on the lord. You know where the lords are. It's on his tail, or it's that area between his eyes and his beak. And in flight, they're different names, but it helps to learn those guys. There won't be a test. It's taken me 30 years to learn some of these guys. What you want to do as far as identifying birds is use a process we call GISS, G-I-S-S, general impression, size, and shape. This is something that bird watchers stole from aircraft pilots in World War II. That's the way they identified enemy planes. by its general impression, size, and shape. What does it look like? What size is it? Is it the size of a sparrow, size of a robin, size of a crow? That kind of thing. What kind of bill did it have? Did it have a long down-pointed bill? Is it up-pointed? Did it kind of go to the side? Was it a conical shaped bill? Was it hooked? What any colors on it at all, like a red breast or anything like that? What are some markings on it, like wing bars or things like that? What is it doing? Is it flitting about or sitting still? Is it walking or hopping? Most sparrows that we have hop. Both legs at the same time move. They hop from one place to the next. That's hard for a 74-year-old man to do. Hop. But pipits, which look very similar to sparrows, and you find along shorelines and stuff, they walk. They walk. It's like that. Is it hovering? Like this, like a kingfisher does, or a hummingbird does. Some hawks will do it over a field. There's something down there that they're waiting on, and then they go down and get it. Actually, for hawks, it's called kiting. By the way, another side story. There's a little falcon we have here called a kestrel. The kestrel, he can see in ultraviolet. He will sit and watch a rat or a mouse go to its burrow. And then he follows that urine trail to find that burrow. This rat's going to pee all the way to his burrow. And he follows that urine trail to there that he stakes out over that burrow. And when he comes out, bang, he gets it. Is it hovering, soaring? Is it soaring? Yeah, I know what soaring means. And is it foraging for food? Is it looking around, or is it just kind of hanging out? What a bird is doing is very critical in how to identify, because some of them do those things differently than other birds. One question the first question you want to ask in trying to identify a bird, and I didn't put it up here, does it belong here? Somebody said, I saw a penguin this other day. Penguins are here. Or if it's in the middle of summer, somebody said, I got a ferruginous hawk today. No, you didn't. You got a very white red-tailed hawk. Ferruginous hawks we only get here in the wintertime. But sometimes in the guides, and let's say. So in your field guide, it'll also have a range map. Show you where they should be, at what time of year they should be there. Same thing goes for plants and bugs, because they migrate and move around, and they look differently in different seasons. Where is it? Is it on the ground? Is it near the ground? Is it mid-story? Warblers, we get 54 different species of little tiny birds called warblers, and they're all different colors. And in the springtime, when these guys come across the Gulf of Mexico and land in South Texas, tens of thousands of people like us are down there waiting on them with cameras and binoculars and zoom lenses and all kinds of stuff, waiting on all these little tiny birds to just come falling out of the sky, starving to death because they've been flying for 25 hours and they're pretty pooped. And they're coming in, and then everybody's coming in trying to get a picture of them. Well, all these little birds have different areas that they feed. Like I would never look for a hooded warbler at the top of a tree. He feeds on the ground. I've never seen one higher than 5 feet off the ground. So that's where I'm going to go for a hooded warbler. For a cerulean warbler, I'm only going to look up at the top. So, and these are the birds that draw people from all over the world to South Texas. I've met people there from just about every country in the world down there during migration. There's a little town there called High Island. It's neither high nor is it an island. It's on a peninsula. And it's a little tiny town. And that's the first part of land that when the birds are coming across the Gulf of Mexico, they come into. And if there's a storm forcing them down, they have what's called a fallout. Did anybody see the movie The Big Ear? Jack Black. And he's talking, there's a fallout, nuclear fallout. No, it's a bird fallout. They fall out of the sky into those trees. Let's talk about transition zone. Okay, you got an open field and you got a forest. Well, that area where that forest meets that open field, that's a transition zone. You got a shore and you got water. Where the shore meets the water, that's a transition zone. And that's where you're going to find most animal life. You're looking for a deer, you're not going to find him way in the woods. Usually he's going to be pretty close to that field where he goes out to feed, stuff like that. And same for birds and stuff. They're going to be in that same area. That's the first place you should look. Not to say you'll never find a deer in the woods. I find them out there all the time. See a thick brush shoreliner in the water? Where did you see it? What time of year, time of day? Because you're not going to find nighthawks in the middle of the day. Sometimes you might, but mostly they're going to be kind of. Who is it with? Is it alone or is it a feeding flock? A feeding flock, sometimes you'll hear little chickadees fussing coming along. And all of a sudden you'll hear a mouse fussing too. And then all of a sudden you'll hear a downy woodpecker. Well, they're all coming together. They're totally different species. One's got a woodpecker, you got a titmouse, some chickadee. You may have a black and white warbler in there. They all eat the same kind of food. So they're coming around using each other to help find food, and they're using each other to watch out for predators. That's called a feeding flock coming through. Or you may have a whole flock of, say, 100 or more cedar waxwings coming into a tree that's covered in berries. And 10 minutes later, there's not a berry to be found. They come in and just wipe it out. Or a bunch of robins doing the same thing. Remember to look at field marks and not for field marks. I can't tell you how many birders, and I've done this too. I'm looking for a particular bird, so I'm trying to make this bird into that bird. So I should be seeing wing bars. I think I do. I believe they're kind of faint right now, but I think I see wing bars on that bird. No, don't do that. Don't be looking for a field mark. You look at what's actually there. And then that way you're going to wind up with the correct identification. Some birds are not identifiable. Actually, there's like 5 different little bitty tiny birds out here. Unless I could get a whole lot closer, get a better lens, a stronger spotting scope, there's no way I can know that. I do know they're sandpipers, but I have no idea if they're least sandpipers, Semipalmated, or western sandpipers. So you just say, good to see you. I hope to see you down the road, a little clearer. Have a good day. Stay out of the way of birds, the bigger birds, you know. Most birds have many different songs that they sing to establish their territory and to attract a mate. Song is what they sing to do those things. They also have alarm calls to warn each other about danger and stuff like that, or they have a flight call. A lot of birds, particularly the smaller birds, migrate at night. And so they communicate at night with each other, saying, I'm over here. Here I am, Mom. I'm coming up behind you, that kind of stuff. And you can hear those flight calls. Think of a mockingbird, for instance. Mockingbird's got up to, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 different songs. He basically mimics what he hears, but he does have his own song too. And his mate he's looking for somebody, or she is, that can really belt out the song, do it clearly. And I have been fooled by some mockingbirds into thinking something else is there. And you can fool mockingbirds too. If you've got a mockingbird that hangs out in a particular shrub that you walk by every day, just when you walk by and you know he's in there, just whistle any little ditty. And do that same thing every time you go by it. Pretty soon he's going to be singing that same song. So you can fool him into doing that. And there's a cousin to the mockingbird here called the brown thrasher that we get. They're both in the thrasher family. The brown thrasher is kind of brown with spots on it. He's a little bit bigger, but they both mimic other birds. The difference being the mockingbird does everything in 3s. Tweet, 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 chirp, 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 chee, 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 that kind of thing. Brown thrasher does it in 2s. Tweet, tweet, chirp, chirp, tee, tee, like that. So just count. This bird is anti. What he's doing, he's got feather mites. That's one of the things that birds preen for, to try to get rid of the feather mites, because feather mites eat feathers. And so let these ants get all over him, and these ants produce formic acid. But formic acid eats away those feather mites. So he will take a few stings just to get rid of those feather mites. And another way to combat the feather mites is through dust bathing. You may have seen this. If you got a really dusty patch, sometimes you'll see the sparrows or something getting out there. It looks like they're taking a bath in dirt, which they are doing. They're flipping that real soft sand or dust onto their feathers. That feathers acts kind of like diatomaceous earth. It clogs the joints of the insects, the mites, and they fall off or they starve to death. They can't eat. These are house sparrows on the left. These 2 guys on the right, those are cactus wrens. We find those further south. You ever watched a CSI episode where they're doing something in a desert? You'll hear these guys in the background. And I usually say that they sound, the cactus wren sounds like an old 52 Studebaker pickup with a bad battery. Ran, 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 ran. And they'll do it for an hour, and that's what you hear. This is called begging. You got a bird feeder out, and you see the little birds come into to their moms to be fed. They'll have their wings out like this and just be vibrating, that little mouth wide open. If you look real closely at the mouth, the bill is outlined in a bright yellow, soft keratin structure. It'll eventually harden and become part of the bill. But it's a bright yellow, gives the parent a target where he can stuff that seed or stuff that bug right in there. But I've actually seen grackles feed a sparrow just to shut him up.
Oh. Oh my gosh.
What you need to watch birds, you really don't need any of this stuff. It just makes it easier. I ran into a group down in the Rio Grande Valley years ago, about 10 or 12 people. They were all blind. Every one of them couldn't see. But they had a sighted person with them to keep them from walking off of a dock or something like that. But at the end of the day, they would have identified 60, 70 different species of birds, strictly on sound. I could never do that. I've tried it. You can't do that. But binoculars make it easy for the birds that are farther away or just really small. Sometimes a scope helps. And you need an ID guide of some kind. Don't carry that identification guide with you. I would never carry this book with me in the field. I'll leave it in my car. Because the problem with bringing it with you in a pouch or something like that, you got this bird you've never seen before. You're looking at him with your binocular and you find him in the book. Okay. Let me look at him again, find him in the book. Where'd he go? You're fiddling with your book and he left. What you want to do is watch that bird until he leaves. Don't take your eyes off of him. Stay on him. Talk out loud. What are you seeing? I'm seeing a blue head, a green body, a chiseled bill. Where am I? I'm in the Rio Grande Valley. I think that's a green jay. Sure enough, it is. But if you start fumbling around your book looking for a green body with a blue head, you may or may not ever get to it long before that jay's gone. So use that for later. But if you say what you're seeing out loud, and this goes for anything, an insect or whatever, say it out loud. You're more apt to remember it than if you just think what you're seeing. You know, yeah, you look like a crazy old man talking to yourself. I'm used to that. And patience. Okay, you got to have a lot of patience. Birds are there on their time, not our time. Sometimes they make you wait. I think they're just behind the tree. The different kinds of binoculars, you have the roof prism and the poral prism. I particularly prefer the roof prism. They're a little easier to see through for me. People ask me all the time, what's the best binoculars? Okay, you can spend anywhere from $100 up to $4,000 on a pair of binoculars. But the best binoculars are the ones that you see the clearest out of. You may see very clearly out of a $250 pair of binoculars. Whereas my eyes are terrible. I need a $2,000 pair or something like that. But the ones that you can see clearly out of, those are the best ones for you. And I always tell people, if you're starting out, start out with a low power, like a 7-power binocular. It'll be easier to get on a bird that's flying around. You may a little bit later jumping up to an 8-power. And I used 8 powers for about 10 years. Finally, I jumped up to a 10, and I'm not going any higher than that. If I need higher than that, I'll grab a scope. 10 powers, what I use now. It takes a little time in that transition from a 7 to an 8, and then from an 8 to a 10 to be able to find that bird flying. It's really tough. When you're trying to describe where a bird is in a tree or something like that, I don't think any of you are too young to. You remember how to tell time on a clock? The bird is at 2 o'clock in that tree, or the bird's at 7 o'clock in the tree, and you know where to look in that tree for that bird. Because when they see you pointing over here, whoa, that guy's aiming a gun at me. I'm gonna fly away. No, don't point. Just say, look at that 7 o'clock, 2 feet in, you'll find it. And these are what the scopes, you got a straight through scope, and an angle scope. I particularly like to take an angle scope. Reason being, I can put it on a tripod, and you need a tripod for a scope. I can put it low down. Because when I usually have a group of people with me, I'll have people anywhere from 4'9" to 6'8". And anybody can lean over and look down at it. But when you got one set up there for that 6'8", everybody's trying to go like this to see through that straight through. But an angle view, everybody can actually see through it. And those things usually zoom anywhere from 20 up to 60 power, 80 powers. These are some of the field guides you can use. There's dozens more of them. A lot of people actually use apps. I have several apps on my phone that I use. I like the apps more frequently because you can hear the sound. You can hear the songs that they have in the apps. You can't hear them out of the book. But there's a lot more information in the book than there is in the apps. Patience is not the ability to wait. It's the ability to keep a good attitude and my mouth shut while waiting. Also take notes. And this applies not only to birds, but to mammals, insects, plants, anything that you're viewing and is rare to you or something you don't see every day. Write down what you're seeing. Make notes about it. I can't read anything here. I think he's talking about these terms that he's got there. But write down what you see. If you can sketch or draw, I can't even draw a good stick figure. But if you can draw a little figure of it, highlighting the points that are important on there for yourself, you'll remember it much better when you get home. Also, in almost every park you go to, they'll have a checklist of the birds, checklist of the butterflies, checklist of whatever is special in that particular park. And then there are also bar charts. What a bar chart is, it shows you when, not only the bird, but when that bird should be present. The dark lines, it goes all the way across. He's going to be present all year round. Otherwise, he may be winter and fall, or just in the summer or something like that. So it gives you an idea of when that bird may be present. And birders are really strong about keeping a list. My yard list, and bird can go on your list if you can identify it from where you're standing. If I'm standing in my yard and I see a bald eagle flying about 5 miles away, and it's on my list. I can count him in my yard list. And so I do that. And then you also got your county list, how many birds you've seen in Tarrant County, that kind of thing. How many birds you've seen in the state of Texas or whatever state you're in. And the ABA list, ABA stands for American Birding Association. And the ABA area is everything north of Mexico. So United States, Canada, Alaska, and now Hawaii's been introduced to it too. So that's the ABA area. When you're talking to a birder in North America, you're talking about his ABA list. Mine's 723, I think, something like that. But if you're talking to a British person, the only list he's going to give you is his world list, but he sees worldwide.
Why did they put Hawaii on there? Because I feel like
I don't
it
know.
should be
I have
like-
no idea why they did it. In fact, most people don't.
Because Mexico is a part of North America, but
And so is
Hawaii
so are the
is-
Caribbean islands. Part of North
Hawaii
America.
is way over there. So just-
I don't get me into that one. They didn't call Charlie Amos to ask him where is some websites to go to. One I use all the time is ebird.org. And that's where I keep a log of what birds. If I'm out here birding around the park here, as I see a cardinal, I'll enter northern cardinal. And then if I see another one, I just add 1 to it, or add 3 to it, or add 5 to it, and whatever bird. And at the end of the day, I can hit submit, and that'll send out all the birds that I've seen. And they keep track of this, and that way the movement of birds and the status of those birds. Also, allaboutbirds.org, birds.cornell.edu. FWAS is Fort Worth Audubon Society's website, and iNaturalist.org. If you guys seen Sam Kieschnick yet? Been here?
Yes.
Sam Kieschnick is nut. I want to be like Sam when I grow up. Okay? He can talk to a group of 3-year-olds on their term, and they just have it exciting talk about this bug. Or he can sit down with a bunch of PhDs and entomology and go into everything. So he's good. iBird Pro, I use on my phone. I actually use Sibley's more than I do. Those are my phone bills. Peterson has one. Merlin is a good one. Merlin, they've got a little part on their little app where you can hit sound ID and you hold it up, and it'll tell you what bird's singing in that bush. Now, it's not 100% accurate, but what I do is I'll put it, okay, it says there's a white-eyed vireo on here. Let me look to see if I can find a white-eyed vireo. Now, white-eyed vireos, let me give you a little warning. You're going to hear 100 of them. You'll see 2. Those guys, they hide in real dense brush and they just sit and giggle at you as you're looking for them. They're very, very good. And I like to end this section on the sunset. Kudos to anybody that knows where this is. Big Ben.
Yeah. It's the window. Yeah.
Okay, Michael, how do I get to the other one?
Just minimize.
I want to talk just a little bit about, real quickly, about migration, bird migration. Because that's going on right now. I usually do these 2 separate, yes.
Question, so the bird migration. Do you know when Fort Worth decides to turn on their lights?
Yeah, Fort Worth agreed to do that. I don't know that they're doing it or not.
They do it, I just wonder. So you may not know when.
Well, it's supposed to be going on right now,
I think they
through
started.
middle of October.
Dallas too as well.
Yeah, Dallas does too. Supposedly, I know that.
They don't do it on all.
No,
Most.
just the people that are willing to participate, I guess. Okay, and bird migration, you always heard that the hummingbirds hitch a ride on the back of
Oh
geese.
my God.
No, they don't. They don't even go to the same place.
Oh my God. Yes.
Now, I did see, I watched over at River Legacy Park one time, 2 hummingbirds chase off a Cooper's hawk.
Oh.
I was
wow.
looking at the Cooper's hawk and he was doing this. I'm like, what is he doing? I looked through my binoculars and there's 2 hummingbirds going like this at me.
Wow.
He finally left.
Yeah.
Hummingbirds normally build their nest within like 100 feet of a Cooper's hawk's nest. Reason being, he's there. You're not going to get a raccoon or something coming up trying to steal.
Oh, that's smart. Yeah.
I was just gonna, one time I was, we don't live in like this one neighborhood, so we get a lot of doves, sparrows.
Yeah.
a bunch of small things. But one time I was just chilling in my living room and I heard the birds going absolutely wild, screaming.
Hawk.
jumping, fluttering.
Hawk coming in.
Yeah, but what had happened is I looked at the lines and right on our fence line was a hawk with a bunch of sparrows trying to get it.
Yeah, it's Cooper's hawk.
Yeah, it was crazy to see all
Yeah.
those little birds.
They will mob him, yeah. But he'll usually come out with one. Also, they use radar down on the coast to track the movements of the birds during migration. Every one of these blue spots is probably 500,000 birds coming through. Notice down on the southern coast, that's where most of them are because they're coming in there. And then from there, they disperse out. Okay, we're going to look at what is migration, when is it, do all birds migrate? You can read the rest of the list. We'll take them one at a time. What is migration? Migration is the regular seasonal movement of a certain species between a breeding and a wintering ground. Okay. Bison, excuse me. Bison, caribou, they migrate. Walruses migrate. Wildebeest migrate. Monarch butterflies migrate. Even spiders migrate. I was out at Big Bend one time. We were looking for some birds in one evening. And we're going down an old dirt road. We literally had to stop for like 20 minutes. Thousands and thousands of tarantulas were crossing the road.
All those mature males looking for the ladies.
And so then after they got across, then we were able to go. That's the only time I've ever seen that. Turtles migrate, sea turtles. Fish, obviously salmon run. And people migrate. If you go down to the Rio Grande Valley in the wintertime, hundreds of these guys there. Used to, they were allowed to go into Benson and stay for 2 or 3 weeks at a time. Now they've kind of been kicked out of that, but they go somewhere else. But we'd go to they would always have their feeders out. And they have different kinds of feeders than we do here. They got different kind of birds down there too than we do here. And they usually have like a little sign-on book and you're sitting drinking a cold beer with them or a glass of wine and writing in the book, you know, where you're from and all that. And carrying on with all these people and stuff like that. And it's a really, we had the blue bunting over here. You didn't get a blue bunting over there. They're proud of what they get, you know. And they'll take a string and put marshmallows on it. Woodpeckers love marshmallows. Just go in front of woodpeckers, come over with marshmallows like crazy. Birds migrate. So we're gonna talk about birds. When is migration? Right now. From late August, early September to mid-October is when the height of migration happens. July to August, they do what's called hyperphagia. They have to put on a whole lot of fat and get a lot of calories and stuff in their body to prepare for that trip. They also try to molt into the fresh feathers and get rid of all the old worn out feathers. Feathers wear out, so they have to get like hair wears out. Also, fall migration will have more birds in it because it also consists of the babies that were born in the spring. It's their first migration. And usually the babies are not traveling with the parents. Parents have long gone. Parents have already headed out like in late August. Now, the babies, amazingly enough, the babies know exactly where to go without ever being shown. Spring is when they migrate north for the breeding grounds. And that's when you hear them singing and doing their songs, trying to attract a mate, trying to get to wherever they're headed, to Minnesota or southern Canada, Quebec, or wherever, to set up their breeding sites, their nesting sites. In the fall, they're not trying to attract a mate, they're not trying to establish a territory, so they're quiet. So in the fall, when you're about birding, like right now, you're looking for movement. They're not singing, they're not calling, it's very quiet in the woods. There's roughly 1,100 species of birds have been documented in North America. 650 of those 1,100 are migratory, okay? And 350 of those migratory ones have been found in Texas. Now, we've also documented about 660 species in Texas, but not all of those are migratory. Where do they migrate through? You got the Atlantic flyway, the Mississippi flyway, we are in the Central flyway, and the Pacific flyway. Some birds migrate just a few miles, like the Clark's nutcracker. He migrates on elevation. They'll go from upper elevations to lower elevations in the wintertime. In the summer, it goes back up to the hummingbirds, like our ruby throat that we have here mainly, they go about 400 or 500 miles. They go down to like far down as Panama, Costa Rica. The Arctic tern goes from the Arctic region to the Antarctic region and back every year. How fast do they fly? Common loon, roughly about 70 miles per hour. You can outrun a woodcock. Birds who migrate during the day are the ones who spend most of the time outside in the open. Like the water birds like ducks and geese and things of that nature. Swifts, pelicans, herons, egrets, birds of prey, hummingbirds, swallows, and finches. Those guys, normally you see those during the daytime, so they're going to migrate during the daytime. Most birds migrate at night. Those are the ones you don't see out during the daytime very frequently. Once in a while you will. Like the cuckoos, our main cuckoos that we get here is the yellow-billed cuckoo. We'll get the flat-bill in migration. He just coming through. The yellow-billed nests here. Flycatchers, scissor tails, all the Pitternax flycatchers. We do have one flycatcher that stays here all year round, even in the wintertime. That's the eastern phoebe. And she, I would say she is. She too. They tell you their name. Their song is Phoebe, Phoebe, Phoebe. You can hear it very clearly. Thrushes like the mockingbirds, those kind of guys. Warblers and orioles and buntings, they migrate at night. Do my birds migrate in groups? Yeah. When I took this picture up at a place called Whitefish Point in Upper Michigan, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. It's right on the bank of the Lake Superior. It's a 16-mile cross of Lake Superior to the other side of Canada. When we pull up and I see these, wow, good look, swallows up there, you know? So I'm gonna go see if I can get a picture of all these swallows. But when I put my binocular on it, those aren't swallows. Those are blue jays,
Oh, no way.
tens of thousands of blue jays up there. And they go up high and they're just squawking and squawking. And they come back down into the trees. And then all of a sudden they'll go up again, squawk and squawk, and they come back down in the trees 4 or 5 times. What they're doing is waiting for that one person, that one bird to take off across that lake. And then once that, go Steve, you got it. And then the rest of them go following. And if he didn't want to go, then they'll all come back down again.
Wow.
Believe it or not, that's all birds. Little bitty tiny brown, those are sandpipers. You got a black bellied plover there, and it's like a red knot, a few bigger ones, but most of them are just little tiny sandpipers. And these guys, you'll see them flying in just a big, huge flock like this. And they're just, it's called a murmuration when they do that. And it's just the way they turn and bend and stuff. What that's doing is it fools predators like the peregrine falcon and stuff going through. And then geese, I took this up at Hagerman Wildlife Management up in Sherman up at Lake Texoma. And with tens of thousands of geese coming in, and it gets so loud that you have to yell at each other to be able to hear what each other's saying. Because well, we were up there one time, and all these geese around, really loud, and we're talking real loud. And all of a sudden we heard gunshots over on the preserve where they can hunt. Well, you could have heard a pin drop in the grass. Yeah. Every goose head came up like this looking, not a sound. I mean, it was eerie. We go, whoa, you know, just kind of chills. And then the gunshot stopped. And honk, 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 honk. These are sandhill cranes that were flying over my house. I think I counted 52 in there. And sandhill cranes, you can hear those guys before you see them, long before you see them. Sandhill crane stands about this high. Big bird, huge bird. Only crane bigger than that's our whooping crane. You counting them? You're gonna make a liar out of me, aren't you? I'm gonna quickly get off that. Hummingbirds return to the same areas every year. They've done this with like radio telemetry and stuff like that, tracking them. And I don't know if you can see them or not, right over my red chair, that's Zippy. Zippy always came back to our red yuccas there. He came back every year for 4 or 5 years. Some larger birds like raptors and eagles and stuff, they'll actually return to the same nest. I had to clean it up a little bit, add a few sticks and stuff like that, chase out other things.
Do robins do the same thing? Do robins return to the same nest? I seem to have the same.
Yeah, a lot of them do. And a lot of them will come back to the same tree or something that they had a nest in. But if that tree's gone, where am I? What do I do now? You know, where do I go? How do they migrate at night? Particularly the warblers and stuff like that that migrate across the ocean, across the Gulf at night. They use the sun during the daytime, stars at night. They use Earth's magnetic field, geographic features like they'll follow rivers and mountain ranges and stuff like that. When do they take off? Photo period. How long is the day lasting? In other words, is the day longer now than it was before? So that kind of says, okay, I need to leave. It's time to go. Temperature changes. It's a little colder now. So like I said, they got to keep that same body temperature. So they got to leave at that time. Food supplies, all their insects are gone. It did find up in Minnesota, not Minnesota, but Maine one day, all the little smaller birds had migrated out, and the golden crown kinglet was still hanging around. They were wondering what it eats at minus 20 degrees. They did a little survey and they found a particular caterpillar that was still out in that cold. That little, you know, now you wanted to know how do they stay warm? How do they keep their temperature up at minus 20? Well, they found an old woodpecker hole. There were like 64 of these little birds crammed in, sharing warm. Yeah, so they make do.
One of the cool things I saw is the migration of pelicans
Pelicans.
around in Texas.
Oh gosh, yes. You pull off your car and get out and watch, man. Yeah.
Yeah.
You don't hear a sound. And you may have your binoculars on these pelicans flying. And all of a sudden they bank. You can't find them. You look, they're not there. And then back again, there they are.
Yeah.
It's really amazing to watch. Yeah, the food supply. What are some of the hazards they face? The habitat loss, the trees gone, like we were talking about. You got all up through the prairies, where the prairies used to be called a duck factory, where all the ducks were born. Stuff in that area, mallards, gadwalls, and all this stuff. That's pretty much where they come from. Well, the farming process has changed up there. Basically, you got corn and you got soybeans, 2 monoculture fields, and it's covered in pesticides, so there's no insects there. So there's nothing, there's not anything there for birds. Adequate food supply, obviously. Weather changes, got cold front storms, things like that. Birds coming across the Gulf, if they hit a northern front real quick, it forces them down. Hopefully they're over land at that time, because most of these birds that migrate across the Gulf, if they hit the water, they're dead because they can't take off from the water. Predators, it could be hawks, cats, any number of things that kills the birds. And then collisions. Again, with the lights out thing, they collide into, they don't have a depth perception. So they see these lights in these buildings and they think they can just fly right on through, bang, 70 miles an hour into a glass wall. Looks pretty, but to a bird flying across the Gulf, and he sees that, that's not too cool. And every morning that these people walk outside their building, there'll be little dead birds laying outside their building. Windmills, a lot of birds crash into those, bats crash into them. Of course, the storms and then the pesticides. What are some of the birds that can be seen in the central fly zone? That's where we are.
I'm trying to get a lot of images. Can you look at like your spots that you like to go? The slide where you like to go for migration.
Oh, yeah. This is about it. So we're okay?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Some of the birds are the grebes I was talking about. They migrate through here. Geese, obviously. Ducks on the bottom. These are called black-bellied whistling ducks. They migrate in. Of course, herons and egrets, ibises. These are hawks. Hawks actually get up and they do what's called kettling. They get on thermals, but they can't cross the Gulf because there's no thermals over water. So they have to go down through Mexico and all that. So like in the next month, 2 or 3 weeks, head down to South Texas. All the hawks in North America are coming through there. And you may look up and see a kettle like this, 20, 30,000 hawks in it. Don't, when you look up at like birds like that, don't have your mouth open. You got 20,000 birds above you, at least 3,000 or 4,000 of them. You have Mississippi kites. We've had those here for all summer. Swainson's hawks, peregrine falcon, bald eagles. I was over at Viridian one morning doing a bio-split survey over there, counting birds. I saw all these egrets and herons on this little island, but they all took off real fast. And so I look up for a predator. Bald eagle was chasing a great blue heron. He missed, went over and landed on that pile of dirt. So I'm taking this picture. You can see it's not really full daylight yet. This lady's jogging through the neighborhood. She said, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Come in and tell me what you think I'm looking at." So she looks there and says, "Is that a bald eagle?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "Somebody told my husband there was one here. He said they're full of bull." I said, "You have your smartphone on you?" Said, "Yeah, you see it." Put it on my scope, took her a few pictures. I said, "You take it back, show your husband you saw bald eagles." By the way, when you see people over there with binoculars, not all of them are trying to look at their bedroom window. Some of us maybe, but not all of them. And then rails. This is a coot. You see these black ducks on the water with a white bill? It's a coot, the old coot. And then the sandpipers and shorebirds. Gulls. Up here on the right, there's a huge flock of Franklin's gulls. I put it like that because you hear them instead of seeing them. You hear them really loud. You think, I hear laughter coming from up here. And then this is our cuckoo, it's the yellow-billed cuckoo. Chimney swifts, these guys nest in my chimney. I don't cover it, I let them nest. I don't build fires in there anymore. So they're free to eat bugs. Hummingbirds, flycatchers, more flycatchers, swallows. These are purple martins, cliff swallows, barn swallows. This guy looks like a little piece of bark that's going up and down the tree. It's called a tree creeper, brown creeper. He's got that little long pointy bill that he gets bugs out of the bark with. And then wrens, thrushes, warblers, vireos, warblers. These are grosbeaks. These are the same family with cardinals. Okay. I took all these around here. A painted bunting up on the left. Everybody wants to see a painted bunting. They're a little bitty bird. It's got, in Mexico, they call it the 7-colored bird. And then big thistles. Our regular sparrows that we get in the wintertime. Blackbirds, yellow-headed blackbird, grackle, everybody loves a grackle. Red-winged blackbird, bobolink. Our orioles that we get here most of the time are the Baltimore and the orchard oriole, goldfinches, pine siskins. And we talked about the Clark's nutcracker. The Anna's hummingbird really doesn't migrate. It stays in the California region most of the time. The little Rufus hummingbird on the right, it's got the longest migration of any hummingbird. It breeds in Alaska and comes down to South Texas or into Mexico. Bar-headed goose has been noted going over the Himalayas migration. The Griffin vulture actually crashed into an airliner at 38,000 feet, pretty high up. And then the bar-tailed godwit flies continuously without landing or sleeping 7,000 miles. It holds a record. Where do you want to go? Your backyard start, local parks. I like River Legacy Park, Village Creek Dry Beds, Forward Nature Center, Hagerman, Lake Tawakoni, White Rock Lake, Benbrook, East Texas, Galveston, Corpus Christi, Big Bend. Big Bend's my favorite. There's thousands of places just in Texas to go and then all over the world. What's your favorite spot? Where's that? This is a Bosque del Apache. It's a video and you can hear them cracking. It's geese. Anyway, that's it. Questions?
Out of curiosity, you had mentioned the bird earlier that one of the, like a pelican or something, I forget what it was, you said could eat a turtle.
Yeah, the great blue heron.
So the birds are made with really lightweight feathers and white bones. But turtles.
They've got some digestive juices that are really, really strong.
So they can take off.
They can produce that all into a light moving substance in a matter of minutes.
Wow. So I have a weird thing that happened this week, and I think it may be bird related. So my mailbox is one of those stone mailboxes and it's flat on the top. And I left my house and noticed that there was a baby possum head on the top of my mailbox, right? So immediately my mind goes to, okay, there's somebody out here killing animals and leaving things on my property. But I started thinking about it and I was wondering if maybe it could have been an owl. We do have owls.
An hour of Cooper's Hawk.
Okay, because it was at night. I mean, we know during the day it wasn't there.
Probably the hawk that is.
Probably an owl. So would an owl just leave the head and take the rest of the carcass?
They get interrupted, yeah. Probably.
Okay.
If you want to leave a message.
Well, I'm wondering if it's one of my neighbors trying to leave me a message. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, Charlie. Appreciate you. And we're going to take us a quick 10-minute break to transition to our next presenter. So we'll go get some more snacks, chit chat.
So there's a really good story.
For those of you watching online, we're taking a quick break. We'll be back in about 10-15 minutes.
Oh, yeah. I knew it was on my bicycle. And he was like.
I'll leave it right.
Just admiring. I love what you
So like, yeah, so I was. Why is, you were like.
Well, we have a. Yes. It's amazing. Everybody knows I don't even know what all of them are. It was so good. I was like, that would have been right. And then the art department comes into my school, in my classroom all the time. And they're all,
No doing mammals, but not all these are mammals.
I'm glad we brought it.
I know, we saw them on the street.
Yeah.
We were with, like 2 years ago, class and last year's class. We were to see.
So a lot of them are.
My students were, I found school, and so they all have. And I was like, I knew what it was.
It is so cold tonight, although I wore a sweatshirt and carried down. Thank you so much. I got it. It does feel really cool. I got it.
Well, actually, I got teaching first, and I wanted I taught
I was school there. Yes. Ecology and environmental science. I really love it. I love it. Yes, so I was really fortunate to find it so cool. My into my senior year, our nonprofit, the job was youth education. And they liked me so much, they kept me around for several years. And I got there. It's a relatively new position, but been with the company or the organization for at least a year. Yeah. Trinity Park Conservancy, a nonprofit, is in charge of the development and also the conservation of yes, so they've got a lot on their shoulders. And their biggest project right now is building the park. And you guys know where the large like bridges are. I know the final build will have some park. This has been a long time coming. We've been talking about it for a while. And the seems like one thing or the other, they just never get it. They can't keep while rolling something. You think, but no, there's this pencil drawing first name several $1 million for the project. There, but yeah, I've been there for a long time. What I've learned is that they had some sort of design going on, and like architects and like final builder figured out initially one of our right there by the ocean. And it was very recent, I think right before the pandemic, that we purchased the very large site to redevelop that space and so until they're done with that project, you can't touch it. Right? And I joined this company a year or two after that happened. Like, well, then I was doing our hands are tied. I don't think they knew that the right approach was like this way. Yeah, so I started working there 2021, and they got a new CEO like a week. So he totally pivoted the idea by kind of the purchase basically let's already do what they did to achieve technology. Let's look outside the park, so the outside of the park first, and then finally build some capacity within the limits. So it's going to be The west side, east side, east side being like connecting it down to the west side. West Dallas. Two parts of and so more progress happening to that. The reason I'm so late is I just got the build is progressing further than it ever has before. Like working through types of designs, there's starting to get into the one thing, action step, and part of the concept. Well, secret. Well, this is like there's still a lot of things, but I think in 3 years, so that's really exciting.
So this is what they're seeing.
But they're also seeing that.
Yeah, they're still seeing your research. This is you.
Everything that I've been in my life.
So if you're doing so this is if you're done and you're talking. It's not a big deal. Michelle's on. Yeah, so this is what they're seeing. Oh, so it's Michelle. It's Michelle.
I'm at my mother's house.
Oh, look at that.
Nice. Yay, I'm so excited still. All right, I'm gonna walk and listen.
I'll go check this out.
I know, and that's just logistically, we really don't want to. During that I have a luxury of to expand most of the work anyways we do projects with them. I got a chance to
All right, can I have y'all's attention, please? Oh, is that it? Ryan knows it. Ryan knows it. All right, guys. Today's your lucky day. This is a 2-for-1, buy one get one free presentation. So we had Charlie. We bought Charlie. We got Nick for free. All right, so buy one get one free. So I want to introduce Nick to you. Nick actually used to work here at the Fort Worth Nature Center. He was studying at Tarleton State, got an internship here at the Nature Center. And once he graduated, how long was it you started working?
Well, I graduated on Saturday and I started on Monday.
Yeah, there you go. So education pays off, right? So again, probably graduated Tarleton State University, worked here for a while and went off and he left us. That's okay. He's still our friend and we'd love to collaborate with him. He is with Texas Parks and Wildlife, the Inland Fisheries Division here in Fort Worth. Does great work there. One of the other things I like sharing, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing it, but Nick served in the Marine Corps, served our country. So I always commend him on that. But he's going to be presenting on mammals and does a wonderful job with that. So without further ado, Nick Griffin.
Hey, appreciate it, Mike. Looking forward to it. Thanks for having me. Like Michael said, I worked here at the Nature Center. Absolutely love the Nature Center. Recommend it to everybody I come across to. It's a great place to work and visit. I'm sure most of y'all hit the trails, great trail system, and of course the bison. But you might be wondering, like, why is an inland fisheries guy teaching mammals? And like my background at Charleston State was wildlife. Kind of transitioned over to the fisheries side of things. So that's kind of my background, and I'm doing fish now, but I'm still a mammal. So
A fine representative of the mammal class, yes.
Right. So I kind of start here with the most iconic mammal species, right? Everybody thinks of an armadillo when you think of mammals. No, we'll just get here, go start. And I know a lot of people are looking at the skulls. We'll get to the skulls. And I love the skulls too. That's one of my favorite parts. So I kind of tend to go pretty fast because I want to get to the skulls. So I'll try to keep a decent pace, but you'll notice I might be going fast just because I'm excited about skulls. So here we go. How do we work this thing?
This is how we accidentally stopped sharing during the last one, so. Yeah, if we just click over here, does it work now?
There we go.
Hey.
So we're going to go over today is what is a mammal, mammal taxonomy, mammal origin, dentition, adaptation, locomotion, reproduction, of course, skull identification. So what is a mammal? Any takes, guesses? Anybody?
Hair.
There's a good one. There's good. Milk, yes. Live birth. I mean, some snakes give live birth. Hair's a good one. Milk. So I'm going to give you the best definition I got when I was in college from my mammalogy professor. Hirsute, lactogenic, endothermic, homeotherms. There you go. We talked about mammals and spit that out. Sounds pretty cool, but you break it down: hirsute, hair, lactogenic with milk, endothermic, warm-blooded, homeotherms. They maintain that warm temperature, right? So there we go. And then if you look at your Master Naturalist book, it'll be on page 518. So like I said, endothermia, maintenance of that relative constant body temperature, they produce heat from within side, and then the homeotherms, they maintain that constant temperature. So the taxonomy, we have Animalia, obviously, the phylum Chordata, subphylum Vertebrata, class mammals, and then with that, there's two classes. You have Protheria, Theria, and within that subclass Theria, there's two infraclasses, Metatheria and Eutheria. We'll go a little bit further into that. So the chordates, they possess a notochord, hollow dorsal nerve cord, pharyngeal slits, endostyle, and postanal tail, at least at some point in the development. And then the subphylum vertebrates, obviously, are your chordates with the backbone. And then, as we just learned, mammals are hirsute, lactogenic, endothermic, homeothermic. You can get it right. There we go. Don't forget, that's the most important thing I can teach you right there. Hirsute, lactogenic, endothermic, homeothermic. Right. Except for the skull. So the subclasses of Protheria, break that down as first beast, egg-laying mammals like your duck-billed platypus and echidna. And then over here we got Theria, the Metatheria, the middle beast, your marsupials, and then true beasts, your Eutheria, all your other mammals. So the origins of mammals, 250 million years ago, they were running around in the Triassic period, small little critters running around at night. So a lot of mammals don't have good color vision. It's kind of based around their starting to running around at night. But you can see they're real tiny little guys at first. But yeah, 250 million years ago. So they've been around a while. And some of the changes we see here, the jaw manipulations, heterodont dentition, different types of teeth, and that'll be a big player. We'll go a lot into teeth. So the limbs rotate from, like, you think of an alligator, they're kind of out here, versus like a cheetah, they're up under, their limbs are up under their body. Is another big change. And of course, a lot of others. So the heterodonts and fission, so much why mammals have been successful is their teeth. And so it's a really big deal. And we'll talk about that a lot throughout the course here. So the mammals are the only vertebrates that masticate, like so the birds, they pick and swallow whole, where mammals were chewing our food and breaking it down. And you can see here the difference of carnivores and herbivores and the different types of teeth. And so like the teeth are such a big deal. They have a dental formula. So you have incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. And the way they do is they break it down the jaw in half. So you have your left side and right side, lower jaw and upper jaw. So in this example, we have 3 incisors, 1 canine, 3 premolars, and 1 molar. And so like if you're looking at skulls and you're trying to figure it out, and that may be a distinctive characteristic between 2 species. So it's like, oh, this one's got 4 premolars, this one's got 3. That may be your identifier between those 2 species. And then you'll total that up and it'll give you the total amount of teeth. So different types of teeth that have a slingodont here. There's a crescent shaped teeth. In this example is a white-tailed deer. And you kind of see the ridges go along with the jaw there. And lophodont.
I can see over your head.
Okay, good. Lophodont here, the ridges run transverse with the jaw. Again, and this is just kind of help you out when you find a skull. If you're looking at different mammals, you can kind of, oh, I saw that kind of dentition, and kind of help you put the piece, puzzles together. The cecodonts, so there's a carnivore, the scissor-like teeth, they actually, used for cutting when they come together, just like scissors for cutting meat. And then bunodont, and that's kind of like what we had, that's our molars are more like that. And here we have feral pig there. But they all have their own purpose and things like that for whatever they eat.
What was the lophodont?
Lophodont, that's a beaver there, but elephants too. So adaptations, obviously you can see vast adaptation differences here. We have jackrabbit versus the hare. So it's I'm gonna talk about surface area and volume, and it plays a big player in the different adaptations that they use to survive in their habitat. So Allen's rule states that extremities are reduced in animals inhibiting cold regions. So obviously the extremities are reduced, like these long legs, long ears, versus no short little legs, little ears. And then Bergman's rule, it states that as you increase with body size, you increase with altitude or latitude. So like white-tailed deer around here aren't known for being that big, but as soon as you get to Kansas, if you hunt, that everybody knows that white-tailed deer in Kansas are huge. And obviously we move north in latitude, they're getting bigger and so on. And that stays true with most of your species. And so as an animal size increases, your volume changes much more rapidly than your surface area. And I kind of like to think like I have a couple of kids, they're bigger now, but when they were babies, they're little, they have a lot of surface area, but they don't have that much volume and they're just little balls of fire. When you're holding on to them, they're losing a lot of heat, right? But as you get bigger, your volume is a lot more than your surface area. So you're able to retain that a lot more and you're not losing it through your surface area. So, something to think about. A lot of nature, like this surface area is just a huge player, just like your intestines and the microvilli in your intestines. That's all like increasing surface area so you can digest, get more of that thing. So I always thought that was pretty neat. Temperature regulation. Most mammals don't migrate. And then also there's a linear relationship with your body size and metabolism. Like you think of a little mouse running around going crazy. Its metabolism is just going a mile a minute versus your bigger animals like an elephant, and metabolism just not as high as that little mouse running around. Insulation, think about whales and the blubber or polar bears, things like that to help them. Appendages that we talked about earlier, longer versus shorter. Coloration and dormancy, just say it's too cold, I'm just going to take a nap and we'll wake up in the spring, right? One way to get around the temperatures. Some heat, you're gonna, like dogs will pant and then we will sweat, obviously. The larger ears of the jackrabbit, they're going to dissipate that heat out there. Counter current heat exchange, we're going to talk a little bit more about that, but like the veins and the relationship, how close they are to others versus coming from the inside of your body towards your extremities. Estivation is kind of like your hibernation in the summertime. And then on the cold, you have the smaller ears. The same thing with counter current, it kind of works both ways depending on where you're at and what your habitat is. And then insulation, of course. So here we have the counter current heat exchange. You can see, so we start here and enter at 37 degrees. And as we move further out, our extremities are going to be okay. Hand movement's good because we're still at 24. By the time it gets back to our core, it's only going to be 16. So that's going to affect us pretty big. Not ideal in most situations. But here we're starting at the same temperature. We're going out. Now we're only at 15 degrees because as the blood's coming back from the extremities, it's cooling down that blood. And so our fingertips are only at 15. We're not going to have much movement, but by the time the blood gets back to our core, it's 36. So it's not going to cool down our core as much. So kind of a lot better deal in that scenario. Here we have cool antelope. We have evaporation in the nasal passage. So the blood vessels are going to go towards that. And as it's breathing and you got that evaporation, it's going to cool down the brains. And so he's going to keep his wits about him and not overheat just by the way the vessels are, that nasal passage. So that's pretty neat. Pretty cool adaptation there for surviving the heat. Another big deal we have is osmoregulation. We have water. It's obviously a big player. We're 70% water. So how we get water and how we lose water is a big player in how we survive. For mammals in general, ways we get water, just drinking water. You have free water. For warm water, so we get from food, like if we're eating watermelon, a lot of water in that, obviously, and plants and things like that. And then metabolic water, so one instance there, like if you eat some fat, as you break down the fat metabolically, it produces water, so you can get water that way. So a lot of animals, it may not seem like they're drinking water, but they're getting water these other ways. Reducing water, lengthen the colon to absorb more water. One thing I like to think about, like horses, if you look at their droppings, right, they're really dry dropping. So they're living in dry areas. There's not a lot of water. So they're going to try to get as much water as they can from that waste before they excrete it, right? And you think of like cattle, it's real moist. They have plenty of water. They're not worried about, they're not living in areas that are arid and dry. So they don't have that adaptation of that lengthened colon to get that water out. It's not necessary for them. Concentrate your unit, have really efficient kidneys. So obviously if you can get all that efficiency out of your kidneys, you'll get less waste, or you'll maintain more water that way. Loss of sweat glands, like dogs don't sweat, so they're not going to lose that water that way. So it comes with other problems, but you're not going to lose water through sweating. So, and then the ways we lose water, obviously, is urination and then evaporation. And then for the females, the lactation, it takes a lot of water to produce the milk for the offspring. Now we get to talking to locomotion. How are we getting around? Foot posture here, we are plantigrades. These are cool terms that you can use with your friends at Friday nights, just having conversations here. I always tell my kids, yeah, you're just plantigrading around, walking around. They're just like looking at me like I'm crazy or whatever. So yeah, we're just walking on our feet, plantigrade squirrels, bears, those kind of critters. And then we have digigrade, we're walking up on our toes. Pretty cool. And it's all about like lengthening our stride and lengthening that fulcrum so we can get more speed, right? So dogs, cats, walking on their toes. And then their prey are going a step further and we'll say, hey, we're not just going to walk on our toes, but we're going to walk on our fingernails, which is absolutely insane. So that's the ungulate. So ungulates, your hoofed critters, they're walking on their fingernails. It's kind of crazy to think about, but as you can see, everything's lengthened out. They can get more speed that way.
Does that mean for plantigrades?
Yep. Thus, so ambulatory, any guesses on what that might be? This is just kind of the movement. So ambulatory, walking. Yeah. Back to cursorial. It's like dogs are built to run. So like think of like wolves and coyotes. They do walk, but morally they're always trotting, right? Like cursorial, running. Saltorial, it's hopping, bounding, like a kangaroo. Ricocheting is like a kangaroo rat. They're just kind of like bouncing, you know, that's a kind of ricocheting. Brachiation, anybody know that one?
Gibbons.
Yeah. What's that?
I said Gibbons,
yeah, like
Simons.
monkey bars, so they're brachiating. So that's brachiation there. They get around. Bowling. Fine, yeah. Listen. Yep. I don't even know, y'all already know those. I can go home now. The Boreal. Tree, yep. The Sorial. The burrowing, yep. So y'all nailed it. All right, I'm done here. So the distribution of mammals, how they kind of get around, corridor, allow passage without barrier. So you kind of just, if you can walk across, there's no barrier there, go for it. Bearing land bridge, they just kind of walk around, across and have access to this new area. Then there's the filter. And if you can get through it, you can handle it, then no problem. You have access to it, but a lot of things aren't adapted to get through that barrier. So you're kind of stuck there. The Panamanian Isthmus, we'll talk about that here in a minute. And then sweepstakes, it's like a really random occurrence, like a hurricane or something you might get. Not really a thing that really happens a lot, but happenstance. Yeah. So here we have the Great American Interchange. So these critters were in South America, coming up to North America and vice versa. So some of the southern mammals that crossed were porcupine and possum, and like a lot of armadillos, anteaters, sloths. They couldn't make it through the filter, right? So they're just kind of our South American species there. And then North Americans, the shrews, kangaroo rats, poppy gophers, they couldn't make it through, but rabbits, squirrels, field mice, dogs, bears, raccoons, they all were able to make it through. So they crossed over, no problem. And then some that, for various reasons, probably infrastructure and things like that, those can't make it back. Those critters there. So pretty interesting. Thought that was pretty cool.
Camels.
What's that?
There's camels and stuff in there.
Apparently so. Yeah. Everybody's favorite reproduction. We'll go in here. See the bison that we have here at the Nature Center. They have here now. Highly recommend to go see them. They're one of the coolest species that we have. Very majestic. Sexual selection. So heterosexual selection is male competition. You see two whitetail, they're fighting for access for the females, right? And it's like a dominance. I'm gonna physically beat you and have, not allow you to have access to the females. So that's intra-sexual. So it's a male versus male, direct competition for access to the females. Pretty common. I'm sure you've all seen whitetails battling it out and get pretty crazy. There's not a lot of examples of the intersexual selection. It's more like advertising. You see in birds where they're advertising and they're selecting based on that. But one example here is the Irish elk, which is pretty cool. The females kept picking all these elk with these massive antlers, and it just kind of got out of control. And well, they lived in like these peat bogs in Ireland, so their antlers were just so big that they couldn't move around, and basically that became their demise. So pretty interesting story there, but it kind of was like a runaway deal. Pretty interesting, but not very common in mammals. Mating systems, monogamy, obviously, lifeline partnership there, and then various polygamies versus males with multiple female partners and vice versa, and then promiscuity was males and females with multiple partners. And then here you have resource defense polygamy, where just as the name implies, you have a resource, you're going to defend it, and that's how you're going to attract the females, right? I'm protecting this area, it's got lots of resources, come be with me. And the male dominance, kind of like the buck or elk, where I'm just gonna beat you up, and I'll protect the harem of elk here, and that'll be the way I have access to the females. And then the scramble is like widespread, like think about mountain lions and things like that, huge areas, and it's kind of like it just happenstance to kind of come across one, right? Just that's how they rely on finding their partner. Here we have the monotremes, which are the laying egg mammals. have the duck-billed platypus and the echidnas, the kind of only ones we have left. The marsupials, which obviously are the short gestation and then extensive development after birth, and there's pros and cons to that, obviously. And then the eutherian and the long gestation, variable development after birth. So they're more ready to go after birth, more so than marsupials. So if you think like the marsupial, if times are tough and you've already given birth and it's just in your pouch, you can kind of abandon that, right? But if you're a eutherian mammal, you're kind of stuck, right? So if things get tough or stressful, it's a little bit harder to get out of that situation. So there's pros and cons to both. There's various development. Yeah, okay.
So will a marsupial like?
Yeah, it's certainly possible. Yeah. Nature's cruel beast. Here we have different development, delayed fertilization. We'll kind of get into these, and a lot of these are in bats, and the bats are pretty cool. And we'll talk a little bit about those. So delayed fertilization, the copulation takes place in September and October before they hibernate. And so the sperm is immobile and is stored. And then in the spring times, the sperm become mobile and then fertilization takes place. Delayed development is just like the name implies. So the sperm fertilizes the egg and it forms this gliocyst of 200, 300 cells, little ball of cells there. But then it's delayed in its development, and then they can wait till the available insects, and they kick it into high gear, and that's pretty cool. And then delayed implantation, it's just like that, except for the gliocyst kind of suspends until the time is right, and then it'll implant, and then the different ways of doing things. This one, I think, is really cool. So this one is shown in a lot of kangaroos, and here we go. We're going to break this down real quick. So the kangaroo mates, right? It's only a 33-day gestation, gives birth, and the little joey goes straight to the teat. Will be suckling for 235 days, but immediately after it gives birth, she mates again, and then that gliocyst is in diapause, so it's going to be on hold. And so as this joey is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, the joey leaves the pouch, still comes back for milk every now and then before that happens, the true gestation of the second one starts, then it gives birth. And so the first one's coming back and forth, and the second one is now suckling, and then immediately mates again. So now we have the third one, and it's in diapause. So there's 3 different young going on all at the same time. I don't know how they do it. I can barely handle one at a time. It's pretty cool though. I thought that was really cool adaptation. A lot of things going on, but pretty crazy if you ask me. Is there any questions on that? Pretty cool. Yes, there's a lot going on. I think I'm flying through here, but that's all right because look, let's go like here. Right? So some folks were asking me. I'm just going to kind of go over some of the common skulls. Most of these I found like out here, or one I was talking to some folks on where you get yours, and a lot of them are roadkill, so it's a good way to find them. It's pretty gross. You get some weird looks, and I don't know how well you are into it, but that's how I got a lot of mine. You just kind of have to have a strong nose, I guess, and a strong stomach. But so like this one was just on a trail out here, river bottom. And I come across it, and you can obviously see pretty camouflage, but if you look around, you'd be surprised at how many more you can see, especially when you kind of get the eye for it. A lot of people like to hunt for sheds and things like that. You just got to get that eye. When you first couple of times you go out, you're like, man, I'm not finding anything. And then you kind of get the areas in which corridors and pathways and game trails and things like that, and you'll start really picking it up. So we'll just kind of go over the common ones, like I said, in this area. Right. Don't tell anybody that. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. You got me. That's right. Yeah, education. It's education, right?
We have permits.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I have some here that we'll get it. So, I got it. What you got?
I know a lot of bird species are protected.
Right.
Mammals that are protected, like mammals, remains, or like,
That's a good one.
or any other species.
I imagine if it was a danger, for sure. Only maybe an ocelot, right?
We are allowed, we have permits actually allowed to talk about reptiles, like for example, Texas tortoise.
Yeah.
They can actually house Texas tortoise, and we're actually talking with Tech Parks and Wildlife about getting a couple of those and having them on exhibit. So, so yes, they're non-birds that are protected that we must have permits for. Non-permits, basically, a lot of our named animals are alligator, possum, things like that, but some of the other ones, they don't need a permit.
I don't think that bobcats are protected even in cities.
Right.
Coyotes and those types.
The
Yeah,
fur.
no. That's all, anytime.
Yeah. Well, it's like you got to be careful with bird feathers.
Yes. We have a U.S. Fish and Wildlife for that.
That's a big one. Well, let's get into it. This is the first one. Anybody? Oh, this is better now that I'm in person, but I think it's like my 4th or 5th year doing it. I had the 2 years of the virtual. It was weird and I didn't like it. We're back, so we're good. So here we have this critter here. This is how big it is. Can you guess this?
I should guess.
That's good. You remember from last year, right?
Year before.
Okay. Any guesses? White tail deer. It'd be easier if I said this one, right? It's a dead deer. Yeah, so I always start with the doe. This is a very common, obviously, species, and a lot of roadkill in the woods. Very, very common. We have the Selenodontic fish in this crescent. It's pretty sharp. You would think it's an herbivore, but herbivores are breaking down vegetation that's notoriously its hardest. Cell walls, and they're ruminants, so they're couched and it's bad, right? So you got to break it down, get all the nutrients you can out of it. So they're actually fairly sharp. And you kind of have like a young deer here versus a really old one, and you can see how worn down the teeth are. You can check these out a little bit later. So those are things to look for when if you find a skull, or you just find a piece. A lot of times it will be just a piece of the skull, and then you kind of go to the predator prey, do the big eyeballs, and they're not facing forward, right? This little area right here is called the diastema, and they don't have any front incisors, but this diastema area, it kind of allows them to manipulate the vegetation. They're pretty easily identifiable, especially when you get the size of it, the eyeballs, and the teeth.
Like, they have really tiny little teeth.
Yeah, so they don't have upper incisors, but they do have lower incisors. Yeah. Yeah, right there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It looks like little teeth.
They are.
They are.
So they have lower incisors, but not upper. It's just kind of pad, even the bison you'll see.
So what's the point of this?
Snip.
Yeah.
Snip.
Do they have tongue or flesh part?
Yeah, it's just a pad on the upper part. And then, yeah, like they were saying that, so they're not grazers, they're browsers. And then especially in the wintertime, they're getting the nips of the trees. Use their incisors for that. We're talking about grazers versus browsers. Yeah, obviously very narrow. If you think of a bison, it's wide. I think back grazing, where this is going to pick and choose. Here, like forks, you're broad-based vegetation, so we're kind of picking and choosing. Figure out stuff. Says your battery is running low. Yep, like earlier. Any guesses on this guy? Let me see. One of my favorite skulls. Pretty cool. Squirrel. Squirrel.
They came.
Yep, large canines. Yeah, it's raccoon. No, it's- They're pretty ferocious. Just a few weeks ago, there was a raccoon in my dad's chimney. Female. He had some video that thing was.
Oh my gosh, I have a family member that caught a video of the raccoon jumped in the back. This is in like TC area for rabbit chicken.